Hey everybody, welcome back to the PC Perspective Podcast. We are at episode 671. This is being recorded on April 6, 2022. I'm Sebastian Peak.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Brett Van Sprunberg.
And you can find out when we go live for events like this podcast recording session by going to pcper.com/subscribe, as long as that link is working currently. And you can support the site and this podcast by going to our Patreon. Yes, you can become a patron of the PC Per Arts. It's patreon.com/PCPer because we're very creative. And just thank you to all of our patrons. I don't have any new names to add to this week from last week, but we appreciate all of you. And with that, let's move to our most important segment of the week. It's Laramie, Wyoming. Josh, take it away.
So today was... It wasn't the most appetizing looking, as the pre-show may have commented upon, but it was certainly tasty. This is the Sombrero Burger. The Sombrero Burger is comprised of 2 all-beef patties, making up half a pound of meat, covered by roasted green chilies, a queso sauce, liberally basted with sour cream, and then topped off with tahine seasoning. If you've never had tahine, you really should go out and buy some because it's tasty. And altogether, this created maybe an unappetizing looking burger, but it certainly was tasty going down. They did put onions, tomatoes, and pickles in there. What actually did accentuate a lot of the flavors of the Sombrero Burger. And the queso was not so liberally applied that it was extremely messy. I mean, the bun is just kind of barely there. You don't get a whole lot of the bread taste, which is good. I mean, it soaks up, a lot of the meat and the juices and that, but it doesn't really impede your enjoyment of the beef flavor, the crispiness of the onions, the sour of the pickles, then, combined with the sour cream, the queso, and the tahine sauce, and with 2 very, very, very large pieces of meat. I mean, it really is overload. And I didn't think that it would work as well as it did, but it was fantastic. I would recommend it to anyone who is a burger enthusiast. And the fries were, again, outstanding for what we had for today. So, yeah, I'm full for the next 24 hours, and I'm happy about it. And so far, nothing negative has occurred to me.
Let's talk about one of the bigger stories from the last week, which was the mysterious bonus overclocking that AMD users were reporting when they had both an AMD CPU and GPU and installed the latest Radeon drivers and found that their CPU was actually being overclocked by the Radeon Adrenalin drivers, which is very exciting, and possibly voids your warranty. I mean, if you read tech, if it's their software doing it, do we get around that? Does it not void the warranty? But AMD has, this is Tom's Hardware. They've confirmed to Tom's that a bug in its GPU driver is in fact changing Ryzen CPU settings in the BIOS without permission. So it's, auto overclocking. Quote, "We are aware of an issue in the AMD software suite that is adjusting certain AMD processor settings for some users. We are investigating the issue and will share more information as soon as we're able." And by the way, since when is CPU overclocking available through Adrenalin? I noticed that recently, but I don't know how new that is.
They bundled the Ryzen Master into it. So it is actually Ryzen Master that is providing the overclocking. It's just wrapped into the Adrenalin. And there's a driver slimmer you can download from GitHub or a variety of other places that lets you remove certain parts from the Adrenalin driver. And so you can actually remove the Ryzen Master part, which is where this overclocking is coming from, even if it is just PBO. But yeah, it's just sort of a nasty surprise. And, if you've went just, okay, I'm barely okay, I don't want to overclock because the PSU is going to get a little flaky, my memory is going to get a little flaky. Yeah, well, surprise, that's why your system's been a little bit wonky lately.
This is recent addition or recent change, or this? How long do you think this has been there? What was the news on this?
2 official ones ago, and that one came out, I want to say November.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was a long time before they refreshed their driver again, and didn't really do much. but it's still in there.
I mean, they've refreshed the driver like 5 or 6 times since November, but it's not all weekly, I think.
No, it's the beta channel.
I got nothing to say other than I tested with 2 driver versions ago in my big roundup that I'm working on. So happy. I didn't notice any CPU overclocking, especially in like 3D Mark. It wasn't anything outstanding, but who knows?
That was on a Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 9?
5600X, Ryzen 5.
Okay. So
Now at $200 is a really, really nice little gaming processor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially at higher resolutions, because you're not going to be held back by Ryzen 5 if you're at like 1440.
You are correct.
Enough with this 1080p gaming with high-end CPUs. Come on.
Really?
All right. That was AMD. What about Intel? Intel was in the news today. Some very interesting things. I know Josh was on Twitter earlier talking about this very thing. And I'll just...
Not the very thing.
Well, sort of. Well, yeah. I'll source WCCF Tech here because they had an article with an update with an Intel statement. So
basically, it's much ado about nothing. So
Yes.
At first, we saw these slides from a Intel patent that looked shockingly similar to the original AMD Zen layouts. And people thought, oh my gosh, they're trying to patent out, what AMD has already done. And
Inconceivable.
it turns out to not quite be the case. Yes, it is identical. However, this is kind of boilerplate on what a modern CPU looks like. They probably had, kind of the explanation is that they had an intern go and grab a bunch of, diagrams of what a modern CPU looks like because the patent is actually about a security subset, I believe, that they were working on that had absolutely nothing to do with the design that they had kind of submitted as the patent. But again, it was kind of like this background boilerplate of what they were trying to do that describes, where this fits in with a modern processor. And it just so happens that it was identical to what the AMD Zen was. So no, Intel was not in fact trying to patent AMD's CPU. I think AMD already has that not only patented, but they certainly have prior art that they have sold millions of CPUs based on that well before Intel filed this patent. So yeah, Ocean Cove core architecture is not only not alive, but it's just kind of a strange little citation because it's a security deal. I don't know. It's bizarre, but they could have done better, and it certainly got a few people's heads spinning about why it would be. But yeah, it's just essentially boilerplate on a patent application that deals with another part of CPU design that has nothing to do with any of those diagrams. It's just the US patent crap.
It's a picture. Let it go.
Yeah.
They stole 1,000 words.
They did.
it is kind of funny to look at, though. But once you have the context of, no, we were just referencing this presentation, and that's why we have the microarchitecture so exact. But it was a fun thread to follow earlier today.
Yes.
Because we were looking at, okay, here's Intel's patent. Here's AMD's architecture. Intel's patent. AMD's architecture.
These pictures are the same.
Yeah, they're the same. This is the same. So apparently that was just,
Well,
they were
I mean,
referencing this.
Yeah.
You know, when you're debugging, you know, IA64, or when you're decoding IA64 or ISA, then you know the sort of the steps look somewhat similar. Isn't
Your
that true?
logical
Well,
flow
I mean-
chart matches my logical flow chart.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the numbers obviously were identical. And yeah, I mean, they were identical. And I don't think that intern probably works at Intel anymore. So,
Or AMD.
Oh, that's cruel.
yeah. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of Intel, they have a new processor on the market. It went on sale, I think, officially yesterday, and is currently available in the U.S. at places like Amazon and Newegg.com. I'm, of course, referring to the Intel Core i9 12900KS, the Kentucky Shrout Edition. And here it is at Amazon. Now, $739 is roughly the expected price on this. Of course, it depends on how many you're buying. Amazon, this is shipped and sold by Amazon. They want $844.21 for this, which seems like a lot. I had seen pre-orders of $799, but Newegg is
I'll blame
more.
the unions.
Newegg has it for $779, and they show $799 as the list price, which seems more accurate based on some other places I saw. So, if you have nearly $800 to spend, and you don't want to try to play Silicon Lottery and get that magical 12900K that'll do the same thing as this one, you can get yourself a pre-bend 12900K that'll do up to 5.5 gigahertz out of the box. Now,
Look at that processor base power.
Yes. I mean, it starts at 150, but that's, I mean, who's going to limit it to 150?
Who indeed?
It still shows a maximum turbo power of 241, but if you have your motherboard set up, like so many are by default, for some insane max, like 4,096 watts, for example, for PL1 and PL2, then you will exceed that. You will exceed 241. But as you can see, the breakdown here, Turbo Boost Max is 5.5. I think that's on up to 4 cores, and then you have that's thermal velocity boost. So that's opportunistic boosting. Then you have Turbo Boost Max 3.0 up to 5.3, and the actual P-Core Max is 5.2, with your E-cores at 4 gigahertz. So nothing earth-shattering for the standard P-Core and E-core compared to just basic overclocking on a K, but you get those fast default frequencies depending on your workload. Of course, gaming was the one that they were showcasing when they introduced this at CES. So in theory, if your game is only taking, say, like 4 cores, it'll be at 5.5, opportunistically, depending on your cooling, what the power limits are set to. So it'll be fun to play
For
with.
800 smackaroos.
Well, think about this, Josh. You remember the Extreme Edition processor?
Oh, yeah, that was a $1,000 processor.
Right,
back in the day.
at launch, $999. Yep. So here we have basically the modern version of a Pentium D965 for $799 at launch. So I mean,
don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Yeah, I'm not spoiling anything. It's fine.
And it's not even two, physical pieces of silicon. It's just one.
It's true.
Yeah.
Somebody should start a company that just bins regular ones at this to get them to this level.
I don't think that would last. I don't think they'd be able to stay.
No.
I don't know. I think that's probably got legs. I don't know. It seems like a great idea.
We used to have binners back in the day, but not quite for the same reason.
We're flip-flopping. Back to AMD.
It's going to happen again.
AMD is acquiring a smart NIC and networking firm called Pensando for almost $2 billion.
Oh, Pensando. That's how I'm picturing.
$2 billion, which is pocket change for what they made off selling GPUs.
We have these contractions and these expansions of where you put transistors and performance. So, the big goal is to have everything in one chip in one place, but then you have other workloads that come up and they require an external chip that is large and consumes power. And DPUs, or NPUs, I can't remember what exactly. That's an area when we finally have, so many IOs going through 10G plus networks that you want to do things compute wise at kind of the point of entry in networking and not rely more on the host CPU or a GPU doing very, very specialized things. This is doing its own little thing. It's a programmable network chip that you can do all kinds of workloads on. And with the connectivity that we have and what we need and what servers require, this is a growth industry, and it's becoming very important. And guys like Intel and NVIDIA and others have been, pushing on these chips and expanding their abilities and speed and power consumption and complexity. And AMD was obviously feeling like they were falling behind because Intel has an amazing network chip group that, their chips are essentially the standard. NVIDIA has invested in this as well. And we can see this on some of their high-end $200,000 plus big cube things that have all that integrated in the back. And AMD is catching up. And if they're trying to push EPYC as far as they can,
EPYC.
they had to go with this route. So it's good that they did it, and hopefully this group is good. And again, it is a logical progression and the server and storage space for AMD to invest in something like this because it's extremely important. Did I miss anything, Jeremy?
I was going to say that I absolutely agree that Intel is a de facto for general networking, but as far as their smart NICs go, they're still sort of sorting that out. Like, they haven't come to anywhere near the sort of level they have with the Wi-Fi and the general Ethernet. So you've got AMD, who's just picked up Pensando, who honestly, and before this, I'd never heard of them, but apparently they work with IBM Azure and the Oracle Cloud. So they've got a huge customer base, and they've got a customer base that knows what they need when they're shopping for a smart link or a smart NIC. And AMD blew significantly more than this, picking up Xilinx or Xilinx or however you want to say that, who
Xilinx?
also Xilinx. Well, there's another I in there.
Yeah.
It's that company that AMD bought, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's AMD. It's spelled AMD. So they also worked with networking and also touched a little bit on smart NICs. So you've got all of a sudden what is going to hopefully be a really good collaboration, or at least they're all going to be under the same roof and working towards something. So it really puts Intel on a defensive setting of, this is not something we'd really gone into yet in a serious way where we're trying to make it a major chunk of business. We've sort of touched it, but we just love the fact everyone's Wi-Fi chip and network card in their system is using one of our stuff. NVIDIA, on the other hand, they've been doing a lot of this sort of acquisition and working to get all of their GPUs talking together as quickly as they possibly can. And so if AMD can get this going with their homogenized CPU and GPU, that might actually really sort of push them along, because they've been doing this in Infinity Fabric for a while now. They're really sort of focusing on the interconnect, and this is another step they weren't at yet, but I'd love to see, what this leads up to in the next 3 or 4 years.
And if you're curious what a smart NIC is, our friends over at NVIDIA are the first result I found. What is a smart NIC on the NVIDIA blog? It is a programmable accelerator that makes data center networking, security, and storage efficient and flexible. And then there's a picture of Jensen down here, too.
It's a network card with a serious CPU on it and local memory. And
the firmware has got to be pretty intense. You remember back when the K guys, the Killer NIC, their first generation product was actually really good, and you could download and install apps on the card that could do a lot of really interesting things at the time. It was overkill for gaming enthusiasts because the technology was essentially low-end enterprise, and hardly anybody really took advantage of the Killer NIC's capabilities that it had for, not only Killer NIC software, but third-party stuff that they could probably use. And but when it comes to the data center, where you have massive amounts of data that need to get to other servers and front ends, and you need to do other kinds of traffic shaping and security and I mean, it just goes on. I mean, it is very compute intensive to get everything where it needs to go effectively and efficiently. And this is a group that's doing this. And AMD, I think, made a reasonable purchase because they need the technology. I don't know how well the company Pensando was performing, but they have the expertise and the hardware and the design knowledge which AMD needs.
Intel at Ars Technica, Core i3 12100 and i5 12400 review. They call them fast, affordable, and hard to criticize, which honestly they are. I mean, anything that's low cost with good performance, how can you be critical of it? Even if it's not from your favorite CPU brand. The only thing I'd like to say about this, and I don't want to necessarily turn this into a debate about testing methodology, but I made a remark on Twitter in reference to, I think, this the other day about the AMD platforms, because as expected, I mean, you're going to pair typically memory that is the official supported spec.
Well, I mean, you'd be foolish
others.
not to, especially on an AMD platform. Foolish not to.
If you look at whatever the official published specification is for memory for a CPU, Intel used to be like 2666, then 2933, then finally up to 3200. AMD has been at 3200 for a while with Ryzen processors, officially anyway. Though I think just about anyone who is enough of an enthusiast to build their own PC and is running an AMD Ryzen is probably running 3600 memory, because then you get the 1800F clock and everything's faster.
Yes. But officially
it's still 3200. Yes. So there's question marks all over the place, like the fact that now I do understand that they're trying to put the AMD and Intel platforms on an even footing because they're only using 3200 DDR4 on the Intel 12th gen platform instead of DDR5. They're using lower cost boards like a Prime B660 Plus board. But there's also a huge memory disparity that was criticized. 64 gigabytes on the Intel platform, only 16 on the AMD.
which is odd, but I suspect that was either a previous benchmark or memory compatibility issue. But I suspect it was previous benchmark.
Probably. You're right. And then just why I 16 gigs of 3200 DDR4 for the Ryzen 5 3600, and then the same memory for the Ryzen 7 5700G. And one would think that if you're going to run integrated graphics, you would spring the extra $10 or so for 3600 memory. Because, I mean, 16 gigabytes of memory these days is not expensive.
I mean, they haven't exactly hamstrung it, but they didn't do any favors.
No. And I totally and always completely agree with it, but I didn't really think that was more... Those were more like they threw an M1 in there. The M1's memory didn't match that at all either.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh, gosh, no. No, that's all
right?
on chip.
I think it was more that they wanted to show that, you know, everyone who's saving up for an i7 or an i9 to run at 1080p, I think this article made a really good argument that, you know what, you don't need to. An
That's
i3
true.
or an i5 is going to do you brilliantly. And yeah, you complain that, the 3600 was a little bit crippled. You could also complain that 3600 is selling for almost what it should be, whereas the only reason that the i5 12400F is a reasonable comparison is because it currently costs about as much as that when it should be significantly cheaper.
Here's the problem, is that it's still a Ryzen 3600, right?
Yep.
Oh.
Which is a generation behind even, what was released recently.
It is.
Yeah, like the 5600, which is so much better in gaming than the 3600.
And to be honest, I mean, you'd be better off going that way.
ours.
This doesn't make any sense. This is one of those things where if this was presented to me, I would say, okay, this is interesting. We need to put some 5,000 results in there because there's no way we can publish an article where we're comparing 12th gen Intel against
To a 3-year-old processor.
like Zen 2. Like you need
Which is still often beating them.
right. So
It's just because there is also that. Not in every case, of course not. But I just sort of like, I saw this and I was reading more of the i5 and the i3 because you don't see them benchmarked enough.
Mhm.
And I think they just didn't want to have two bars on the graphs. Could they have done a better job choosing what they compared it to? Or, fired up something more recent to compare it? Absolutely, yes.
Maybe this
And,
guy
yeah.
wrote this thing for $20 and these are the only chips that he had on hand.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
comparison.
they blew their budget on those Intel motherboards, and then they couldn't buy
Wow.
Ryzen
And that
processors,
memory.
so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was thinking the 5700G was more difficult to come by.
That's been
Well,
fairly
someone's
easy to
had that
get
for a
but
while.
it's- Yeah, I
It
bought
wasn't
mine,
at first, but
Yeah, no, exactly. It was hard to get, and they weren't sampling me.
right.
But I eventually got one for like 300.
Now they're super common.
Yes.
But the takeaway is that if you hate AMD and refuse to buy one of their modern ones right now, you don't really have to go for an i7 or an i9 if you're just doing light gaming. It's silly.
Oh no.
Mirrors it. No mirror. 4-core CPUs are dead. Haven't you heard?
Well, you can still get them, but do you really want to?
Remember when Nvidia tried to buy ARM, but
Oh,
was
that
never
was
gonna
cute,
happen.
wasn't
Worked
it?
out very
That was
well.
so-
Yeah.
well,
That's
Hey,
Apparently
ARM has been pretty
Hynix,
litigious lately.
Hynix
It's just putting itself out there.
is reportedly considering forming a consortium. This is according to the Register, to acquire UK chip designer ARM, but it's only in the early stages of planning, and they may not actually proceed with the move. But it's still newsworthy,
It is.
apparently.
Well, they would have to create a consortium because SK Hynix could not buy it by themselves.
Bingo.
Yes, they produce a lot of memory. No, their company is not worth anywhere near what NVIDIA is.
Well, it's SK Group that would come up with the money, and they're, of course, significantly bigger than SK Hynix, but still,
Oh, yeah.
this would present a problem. So, did you notice what is being done behind the scenes at ARM to make this
Do
possible?
tell. Do tell.
So, ARM China has been a problem for a while. They fired the CEO for like some just blatant nepotism and other, really bad practices. And so, you know what he did? He didn't leave. He's still running ARM China. He was officially canned along with most of his board of directors, but they're still there and refuse to leave. And this is in the courts.
Because the way China does these things, the third party, first party, does not have actual control over the company. So ARM China is a separate company from ARM. ARM owns 49% of that. So they don't have majority ownership of that. So ARM China is like, screw you, we're staying in here and there's nothing you can do about it. And ARM's like, you're right, we signed on to this, and that's how we got into, a market of 1.9 billion people.
Well,
and now we're paying for it.
So now what they're going to do is they've decided, all right, if this is the way that you guys want to play ARM China, we're changing you into an ARM licensee. You are no longer officially part of ARM, and your valuation will still remain with SoftBank. Whole different friggin' conversation there. But ARM itself is going to be severing one of its limbs to become a licensee, so it's no longer involved in the sale of the ARM parent company. Therefore, in theory, possibly making it affordable for SK Hynix's parent group or consortium, however you want to call it, to actually do this. Whether or not SoftBank will immediately turn around and buy SK Group, and then it just doesn't actually matter except on paper. Well, I mean, that's just speculation. But yeah, it's been a long, drawn-out soap opera we've been watching for many a year, and it's kind of amusing.
Hey, Josh, why is an ARM sale to the SK Group more palatable than potentially a sale to NVIDIA? Why is this getting some play right now? Why are people more energized about this? Why is this more acceptable?
Because SK Hynix sells to everybody, and they don't license out stuff to everybody.
So they
sell
don't have
chips.
a suspicious past. They don't have a suspicious past of locking people out and playing hardball.
Yeah, that and I mean, it would still exist kind of as it is, except making money for different people. and not under the control of somebody like NVIDIA, who has been aggressive in the past in dealing with partners. So yeah, it's not like adding on to a primary mover of a single company. So I mean, NVIDIA has been doing CPUs by themselves. They do GPUs. GPUs are essentially now just massively parallel CPUs, general purpose type stuff. And when they were going to kind of envelop ARM, that caused a lot of angst and anxiety among many partners, because suddenly their primary product is now licensed to them from a competitor. And that's when things get tricky. SK Hynix being primarily memory and some basic controllers and whatnot, not as much of a worry.
Well, and the other thing is that if you're buying out what was ARM China, it means that then they're an ARM licensee. So now all of a sudden, a lot of the legal fight, especially in the UK, we're like, hell, we want to keep ARM England bound. A lot of the stuff, the legal finagling that we saw means that it's not going to happen because, well, I mean, who cares? It's overseas. The fact that it still represents a huge chunk of ARM, it's being ignored. So everyone's happy about it.
Let's pause here for a word from our podcast sponsor this week.
Hey, have you heard of Kolide yet? Kolide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, or Windows devices right inside Slack. And if you're like many organizations, you know you can reach your employees on Slack. Kolide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Kolide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important issues. Visit kolide.com/PCPer to check this out and sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/PCPer. Use your email and get a free Kolide gift bundle after trial activation. At Kolide, we know that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resource, and they're key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys, finding plain text two-factor backup codes, and teaching end users how to store them securely, and convincing employees to uninstall those evil browser extensions that may even sell their browser history. These are just some of the many use cases not solved by locking down devices. You can try Kolide with all of its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days with no credit card required. Try it out at kolide.com/PCPer. That's KOLIDE.com/PCPer.
We're back, and we're going to talk about a new CPU cooler from Noctua. Yes, Noctua, makers of that beautiful tan and brown. Of course, they make some, monochrome, like black stuff now, which is, I feel like it's off-putting for a Noctua.
Isn't that a song? Oh, tan and brown. Oh, tan and brown.
Yes.
They've got corner colors. They've got the little rubber things you can put in the corners that have different colors.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be
very
brown,
colorful.
Okay?
Very colorful.
The plastic is supposed to be tan. The corners are supposed to be brown.
There is no question.
Yesterday, in Vienna, Noctua presented the all-new NHD12L, L for low height. Now, this is going to be a 145 millimeter tall. That is 13 millimeters lower than Noctua's regular 120 millimeter model. This isn't much taller than the old 92 millimeter stuff. And think of the cooling potential here with this low height dual tower CPU cooler. It's a round frame version of the award-winning NF A12 by 25. So,
award winning.
Yes. And this is a 4U rack mount compatible low height dual tower cooler. So I can see.
I'm just not getting a sense of scale by looking at these pictures.
Maybe we'll watch their YouTube video. Maybe that will.
Maybe a little bit, just to kind of like zero in on why this is spectacular.
Okay. I'm sure it's just the fact that they engineered this to be 4U.
5 by 5.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
it's on its side.
they keep moving the fan.
Oh,
Look at that.
there's the
And it didn't break the
4U.
glass.
Okay, that's good.
And airflow. Oh, look, it's asymmetrical. It's one side is wider than the other.
Yeah, and it's got those.
It's like the left side hangs about an inch lower than the other.
Is that to avoid the
not
memory?
everyone
Do you
can be
think?
symmetrical.
I think
That's
I
so
think
when
it's to avoid the
you bang
memory.
them together that they don't necessarily. No, that's not what it does at all.
That's just a handy feature.
Oh, I'd use it for dual fans. I would.
Handy.
It's like a tiny G15.
Yep.
Look at that. Oh.
Well, just
It's
think about this.
cute.
You previously always had to have 165 millimeters for most higher performance dual tower designs, or things like the Hyper 212 Evo. That's 165 millimeters approximately. So it's just nice to see something that's big and capable. I want to see some reviews. I actually went to buy one of these. I saw this, and yesterday I went to Amazon, and they don't have it yet. I should probably reach out to them and say, "Hey, can I review this?" Because I'm very curious
Because we do have
potential is.
a relationship with them, correct?
It's been a while. I think Maury was our guy. I don't even know who our press contact would be. I will reach out to them. Or if you're watching, Noctua, talk to me. We will review this. The Return of Monkey Island is coming, and it's called Return to Monkey Island. Confirmed.
That's damn clever. Damn clever.
Yeah.
So
It's a sequel to the second one, even though there was a third through sixth one made.
wait a minute. So this is a sequel to Monkey Island 2 and not Curse of Monkey Island, which was 3?
This is a sequel to Revenge of, but the skull might be in it.
Okay, wait a minute, though, because he teased this on April Fool's Day. But now they're saying it's
and
real?
then he owned up to it. And the hardest thing to believe about it is that Disney actually said, you know what? You can actually touch your IP again. And you know what? We're even going to give you some of the musicians from what is left of the LucasArts Studios musicians to do the sound for it. They've grabbed a couple of the old voices, like Dominic that did the original Guybrush. So it's going to be interesting to see. Although the teaser that they put out was just hand-drawn, stop-motion.
I have an original copy here. This is even pre MT32. You had to send away for the MT32 support.
Didn't you order the giant specialty only 100 ever made pack? Or
Yeah,
your wife
and
got it for you.
I did an unboxing of that on our for patrons.
It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous, and the amount of swag that came with it, legendary.
It's pretty impressive. I don't know if if there's any point in putting that up on our main YouTube channel, but I did an unboxing video about that. This was a very interesting story in the last few days because I'm thinking this isn't even a 3D game in the modern sense. So
how?
I'm guessing this is running on a new engine. I haven't looked into this yet. I need to. Classic Doom, fully ray traced. The same thing, the same treatment we got with Quake.
Okay,
somehow.
even though Doom is sprite based in things, it still was a 3D space engine.
It was.
Okay.
But I mean, all the characters were all sprite based because they couldn't do thousands of polygons effectively in 1993 or whenever. But it was still a 3D space in terms of walls and height and stuff like that. But it was just, essentially when the characters came in, it blew the polygon. And so they had all sprite based. So if you look at the characters when you're doing ray trace, they're still sprite based characters. It's just the environment and lighting around it much different. See, sprite based,
vertical.
Just lighting.
Would it surprise you to learn this? I believe this is NVIDIA only.
Yes, it is.
A Humble Bundle makes its way into our gaming quick hits again. Who can tell us about the Killing Floor collection?
Jeremy, you picked this up, co-op survival horror slaughter.
Who taught the Killing Floor first? Yeah, it's the first one, and then the significantly better, from what people tell me, second one, with like a whole bunch of ridiculous add-ons, including the ZX one. It's a silly little co-op survival that's a hell of a lot of fun. When the Frag and Frogs were a thing that's used to come out.
Ton of weapon packs. If you keep scrolling, you'll see them over and over and over and over. So many weapon packs, so many skins, so many ways of smashing your opponents into atoms. It's all in good fun, though. It is a bit of a ridiculous shooter.
We like them that way sometimes.
And this is like everything all at once for cheap. So if this is the kind of thing you like, you'll like this sort of thing.
It's a $231 value for just, well, I mean, you pick a price.
I'm
I
not
think you need to
surprised.
spend at least 25
Yeah, it's like
to get everything.
pennies on the dollar. Yeah.
That's the 34 item bundle. But yeah, check it out if you're interested. Let's move on to our security corner, since we've adorably named all of our sections of the
You can blame
podcast.
me. You can blame me.
I do
Go
blame
ahead.
you, actually, privately.
It is my fault. It is. Yep. All right.
All right. That's just how it reads in the show notes anyway. Let's look at the Mac. Speaking of Brett, Mac Security, the Mac Security blog. And there's a little story here from yesterday called Apple Neglects to Patch 2 0-Day Wild Vulnerabilities for macOS Big
Hey.
Sur and Catalina.
Hey, wait.
Neglect.
They just
look.
patched those.
The
They just
binder is sad.
They just patched those, but not everywhere.
No. Here's the thing. They don't want you running these antiquated, deprecated operating systems. Literally, if they're not
Yeah.
supporting them anymore with security updates, they're gone. Because Apple wants you to run their basically iOS on a desktop now, which is only
you stretch the truth.
signed
You stretch the truth now.
64-bit applications, and anything else you got to virtualize. So screw you. Just rely on Rosetta for everything, because I'm sorry. And actually, if your application is 64-bit but only has a 32-bit installer, Adobe, it won't run at all.
Part of the news story here is that Apple was only patching the very latest versions of the OS for the most significant problems. And there were a couple of security researchers who went back in time and discovered this is unfortunately habitual for Apple, which is meaning that there's significant vulnerabilities that they're only patching in the latest version of the OS, even though they say they fully support the last two versions plus the most latest version for all patching and things like that. They're really not doing it, unfortunately. And this shows an unfortunate side of Apple's kind of breaking their security promise to those running their OS, which a lot of people like to point at and say, this is a secure operating system that is actively patched and maintained. And it isn't always. And this latest story, unfortunately, proves that this is a very significant 0-day, essentially, exploit that is not that difficult to take advantage of. And they have really only patched the very latest OSs. And there's a very significant part of the Apple community that's not running the latest OS. So this Apple has left them exposed and will not
true
talk
Apple
about it.
fans.
Yeah, if
They didn't
you're not on
line
the
up to buy the
latest
newest
OS...
Screw you.
Yeah, if you're not on the latest OS, when they first release a beta of it, like, you should be in a dev channel and be getting the latest.
Well, you know what?
And testing it for them.
The population or community pie chart says otherwise from a usage statistic that says most people are not on the latest OS, from a worldwide population perspective. That's just the facts. And Apple does not have your back on this one. So be careful.
This one.
One more security story before we move to a surprise.
Oh, yes,
review.
because the
Jeremy's going to like this one.
The Lynxes and Apaches are feeling jumpy this spring.
So,
Or sorry, the
what
Tomcats, not the Lynxes.
What is Spring 4 Shell?
It's crap.
Hey, do you remember the Log4j problem from not that long ago? Well,
It still
welcome
hasn't really
back.
gone away.
No, correct. This is it's springtime. Leave that Log4j, leave that Yuletide log behind. That's winter.
It's springtime.
Flush that log down.
Flush
Springtime.
Flush that freaking log. It's spring. So this is another very serious vulnerability in the very popular Spring framework that also allows remote code execution and obviously an interactive shell if possible. So for God's sakes, people, Spring was really quick about patching this, but it's up to all the vendors that are running huge stacks of software There's like a billion websites out there that are potentially running this. I might over-exaggerate by a zero. But the point is that the vulnerability surface area out there is very, very, very large. Patch your Spring framework because you're in trouble.
Let's talk about VLC real quick.
Yeah, I just
here's
saw
another
this while we were talking.
I just saw
So
this
apparently,
too.
Chinese hackers have used VLC Media Player to launch malware loader. That's not good. So
Yeah, it's a DLL injection so that if they can get in there, then when you launch VLC Player, it does some fun stuff.
What's the attack vector on this? Do you need to load a particular video, or is it the DLC call out?
No, they've already hit your system.
Oh, okay. It's side loading. So the attacker
So as long
uses a
as they
clean
can-
version of VLC with a malicious DLL file in the same path as the media player's export functions.
And so you can actually fiddle with that, especially if you're doing like automatic exporting of stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be huge, but just the penetration of VLC it makes it scary.
Absolutely.
That's on many a corporate image because it's one of the better ones to use.
Yes.
It is, but you know what? There's more Java out there. I would more exposed Java because you find a lot more VLC behind firewalls and especially NAT bridges and stuff like that. So that's be harder to take advantage of. Whereas a lot of the Java one that we just talked about is public exposed on corporate servers and things like that. So that's a real shitstorm waiting to happen.
We have waited long enough. Jeremy
What?
wrote a review, and it's not hardware.
Hit us.
What
I know.
is
This is the weird one. It's a weird one.
Wait.
So
That's rude.
I get a lot of PR flax offering me game keys, or at least, hey, inquire if you'd like to. And honestly, I mean, I'm not going to check out the brand new Farm Simulator game. And so a lot of it is just sort of, I've got no interest whatsoever. But every once in a blue moon, something comes along that's like, you know what? I don't mind giving this a shot and saying in the first sentence of the review that, yes, they gave me this. And then sort of finishing it off by going, and I wish I could say good things about it. So this is not really a sequel, but a redo of Codeforce's original Distant Worlds Universal game, which was a 4X Universal Galactic Overlords sort of simulator with some fairly interesting mechanics to it. They didn't do like a lot of what the late Civs have been doing, where they're trying to simplify it down to attract a much wider variety of people. These guys are doubling down like, no, we want someone that actually is like needs menus that go 8 steps deep and is actually going into it. So you start out in your usual universe simulator with, a small planet that you've barely managed to get into orbit on, and who the hell knows what a warp drive is, and slowly start to expand into, further and further ways. But now, of course, you're running into an interesting thing, because this uses gas. Your ships actually have fuel capacity. And so you got to start working on, 1, increasing the fuel capacity in the ships, and 2, start figuring out how to build fleets of fuel tankers which can go out and resupply your ships, because eventually you start having to go a fair distance. And it can also take a while, and it really sucks when you go out and you send your mighty fleet out to go and slay a space dragon, and it gets stuck there until the tankers can come and top them up again to get home, because in the meantime you've got other stuff. It eventually becomes insane. Every single one of those dots that you're seeing on that map, and if you zoom in, there's significantly more. If you go to the next screen, it's they represent what could be a transport ship going from a mining station to a supply depot or a colony. It could be some of your military ships. It could be the aforementioned fuel tankers running around. It could be other people's traders running around, your traders. It becomes ridiculous. And the thing about it is that the vast majority of it is automated. You're sitting there and you're just watching the prompts as to say, okay, it looks like you're running short on fuel tankers. Do you want to build a bunch more for this many credits? Yeah, sure, whatever. The economy is automated. As you start to get the equivalent of great people, so the ambassadors to go out and talk to the aliens or the spies to go and spy on them. If you let it, the game's, logic will just do this and do it on its own, occasionally asking you for prompts. But you can take manual control of just about frickin' everything in this. but it gets so obscenely complex. You have a little bit more fun being the old type of God game. And yeah, the resources are sheerly insane. Not necessarily all of them are needed, but they're all great to have. And yeah, that's just over halfway through the ones that I discovered in that particular set of games. But it's so ridiculously nested and complex. You have more fun watching the automation take over everything and sort of watching your empire grow. And you don't deal with me with the concerns. I'm here for the big picture. I'm guiding the research. I'm guiding where the economy is supposed to be going. I'm picking where the new colonies are going to go. I'm going to tell the private contractors where to build mining ships. Oh yeah. You can't build. Oh, it's like, hey, awesome new resource. Go out there and build. No, it's actually a separate economy, the private economy, which does that. You say, yeah, I'm giving you a license to go mine on that asteroid. You get a cut, but we also need a bunch of it too. And that's sort of an interesting thing, is that there are two different economies, the ones you're allowed to play with and the private one. And depending on how poorly you do, the private one may fall down, or the private one might start to grow and also start to hurt you because, well, you are technically the government. It becomes very frustrating at times because as it starts to get complex, you're noticing that, oh, my fleets have split out into 8 tiny little fleets. So I want to move a bunch of ships over into one single fleet so I can go and smack someone down. And you set it to manual, but a couple of the other fleets aren't on manual. And so they start trying to swap fleet ships into your fleet and out of your fleet. And so now all of a sudden you're halfway there and you realize that the reason that your big smack 'em down fleet is stuck orbiting a planet is because they're waiting for this one arsehole of a destroyer that's out of gas that you told to get out of the fleet, but has decided to come back into the fleet. And now the fleet's waiting for it to catch up after the fuel tanker hits it. So it can get really frustrating. The other thing is that as the game gets more and more into the later stages and you are dealing with civilizations that have dozens of colonies and thousands of ships flowing around, and so do you, all of a sudden, if you move to the right or the left a little bit too far, you scrolling a little bit too much, it's your desktop. Hooray. Or if you're just sort of tooling around and you go to click on a thing, oh, it's my desktop again. This is awesome. The other thing is that if you're clicking for a manual thing, in the later game, not every mouse click is registered when you do it. There can be a significant amount of lag. So you go to click on something and then click over to another menu, and what you've actually done, and you won't realize this, is grab a bunch of your fuel tankers and sent them off into God knows where, because that's where it actually recognized where you were clicking the mouse. So yeah, I'd love to recommend this to the type of person that enjoys this type of game, but I mean, at this point, no, not unless you want to sort of join in with the troubleshooting. Like, they released 2 patches today because one completely and totally destroyed the economy, so they slapped in another one. Eventually, this thing should be fun, and I mean, if it's destroying this 6800 XT and Ryzen 7 68, was it 5800X? Yeah, like, and on an NVMe drive. Yeah, it's chewing up a lot of stuff here. We'll see how much of it is bad optimization, how much of it is just they're going a little bit further than they should be. So yeah, if you like this kind of game and you're willing to drop $50 American, 60 some Canadian on something that's very much a work in progress, we could use the help troubleshooting it, because I'm also doing that because it's entertaining. But honestly, no. If you're not huge into 4X games, especially the ones that you sort of let do things, yeah, no. And if you're sort of curious, again, yeah, no, just don't do it now. Wait for a couple of months and we'll see how it does. Maybe I'll take it as a pick a couple of months from now.
It could improve over time. Right now, though, it seems like the Steam users are with you. Mixed. Only 64%.
Oh, the music is amusing because it's a lot of ambient stuff, but it just randomly goes from a very soft, your brain has sort of filtered it out to all of a sudden, dun, 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 and you're like, And you think you're in a boss fight, but then you realize, no, you're playing a 4X game and there is no boss fights. It just changed.
I don't like the idea of having to regas far-flung fleets. That seems an annoying aspect to this.
See, I'm a little bit upset that they hadn't also done ammo colliers. Because apparently some of my railguns have infinite ammo. Because, I should actually have to have a support. Like, this is something that's been missing from a lot of those 4X games.
Sins of a Solar Empire that somebody suggested in the YouTube chat is actually worth a good look.
It's a classic.
Good look as well.
It's a classic game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Significantly more polished than this by now, too, after
a little
12
bit.
years, 14 years.
Yeah.
Let's move to picks of the week, and Josh is going to get us started. Josh.
Bam.
Me. Okay, so sometimes you just need high-end quality audio on your desktop. And these edifiers are about the highest quality you can get for 2.1. They do Bluetooth, optical, coax, and analog input. 8-inch woofer for the sub.
Look at the size of this couch in the picture.
Yeah.
What's happening here?
Look at the size of those speakers then.
Good Lord.
They're large. Maybe that's just a couch for his remote.
I don't get this.
But yeah, it's wireless control, really good quality. You pay for
shelf audio quality, no less.
$349. But if you, like we were talking before the show, Corsair is no longer selling their SP2500s. Logitech has cut back on their 2.1 speakers till now they're not that great. If you want a higher power, high quality PC speaker, you need to go to guys like this or buy real stereo equipment where you have an amplifier outside of your computer, even though it's connected to the computer, and powering regular bookshelf and 2.1 speaker sets or 5.1 sets, because there just isn't much out there anymore. But Edifier does something that I feel is in between. And they make quality products. They sound good. They're full range. But you pay for them. But you know what? If you want good quality audio, not on headphones on your PC, which I game without headphones, but I'm also in the back of the house and nobody else can hear me, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, the golden age of PC audio speakers is past us, and now everybody does headphones, and in ways it's easier for a lot of people, and you still get pretty good quality for $100 or less. But there's just still something about not having a pair of headphones on your head and being able to look around and feel the boom and the bass in your chest, because you've got a 5.1 audio set that is, 500 watts max, that it can peak to, and you feel it when you're playing a game. I'm a little frustrated, but,
I feel you.
It's what it is.
I used these the Logitech Z2300 for a long time.
Oh, they were fantastic.
There was something about that big sub box down by your feet that was very loud, very impressive bass from these.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this kind of stuff is they're not made anymore. And those in the used market are ridiculously expensive for that reason.
Yep.
That's why you need to
There's still a
dedicate
market, but nobody is addressing it, really.
$14.
You need to dedicate your previous generation receiver, the receiver from your living room.
Yeah.
Once you get a new one, take that receiver to where your gaming PC is. It's still got a very serviceable, probably 5.1 system if it's within the last 10 years even. And just get some regular speakers and start hanging them on your wall. Like so.
Mm-hmm.
Best.
This is a Klipsch 5.1 with a powered sub. Freaking awesome for playing games. Outstanding.
My favorite desktop speaker I've ever used was actually a Boston Acoustics A26 They're a bookshelf speaker with about a 6.5 inch driver and a soft dome tweeter. But I paired 2 of these with a Class D amplifier, a pretty high-end one. And it's just, you would never go back if you heard something like that. Like any halfway decent bookshelf speaker with a dedicated amplifier is going to just blow you away compared to the tiny drivers that are typically in desktop speakers. But then there's stuff like you mentioned Edifier. There's a best-selling pair of speakers on Amazon from Edifier that's powered near-field monitors, decent size, and they're only $100. So
do you remember
wow.
Cambridge Soundworks?
Oh yeah,
I do. Yep.
Yep, and they did stuff with Sound Blaster, people.
All my
Creative
live gear
labs.
downstairs is Cambridge. I still have it. They quit years and years ago.
Yep. Sad
Right.
times.
yes.
Sad.
Jeremy, cheer us up.
no.
Okay.
No.
Oh wait, no, Jeremy. Depress
Jeremy.
us more.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting start to a mid-range gaming system that I sort of spotted. It lacks a CPU or memory, but it's got a power supply, a motherboard, and a 6600. So, yeah, definitely mid-range, but Canadian, $710. You can go with a fairly low-end Ryzen 5 for only a couple $100 more. And if you can't recycle your RAM, just take a look around for some good timing, 3600. Again, for only a couple $100 more, you can be pretty much up and running. There was another one that lacked the graphics card, but came with a CPU and wasn't quite as good a deal. Because right now, the 6600 is selling for, well, about $700, a little bit cheaper. So
Yeah, this is a good deal.
essentially, yeah.
Wait
It's
a
not
minute, wait a
amazing.
minute.
It still hurts me,
Wait
but
a minute.
yeah, it's Canadian.
No, I'm the power supply. Is that one of the power supplies that was on the is that the infamous bundled PSU that Gamers
the
Nexus
burn
did an
notice?
expose on?
Burn notice
I don't
with
think
it.
so, because this is a non-modular one. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that one was modular.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Good. Then no issues there. And
Yeah,
I like
no.
Gigabyte motherboards, so I mean nothing wrong with an Aorus board. In American dollars, $709, what is that, like $550? And you're getting a 6600 and
That'd
power
probably be
supply
slightly
and
cheaper.
motherboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't like that one, Memory Express is a 68 or 5800 non-X for roughly the same price. You don't get the video card, but you do get what is that? Oh no, sorry, it is the 5800X. An Aorus Elite AX B550 and an ML2800 liquid cooler, $770. So if you've already got a graphics card, that'd be a better way to go. My guess is that there's far more people that actually have a cooler already than have a CPU or a GPU rather.
Indeed.
And it's still better than Newegg bundles.
Yeah.
Brett, your pick this week.
My pick tonight harkens back to 2 things. Jim used to have a habit of picking television shows or videos or things like that. So mine is also one of those. The second reason is presumably people watching this or on the show can remember barely when they were 13 years old and how damn funny and painful their life was. My pick this week is a show, I can't believe I missed it. Called Big Mouth. Please, if you enjoy comedy that is something that you would never, ever show your children, go watch this because the laughs come fast and furiously.
I was wondering
And
why
it is-
that was on the screen behind you.
Now you know.
Now I know.
We know.
These are 2 characters from that show, Connie and Maury, who are hormone monsters for the 13-year-olds on the episodes, girls and boys. If you want to laugh at yourself from when you were 13 years old, definitely go watch this because you're going to watch it with horror and mirth. Yeah, both at the same time. Go check it out.
Jeez. And it has absolutely nothing to do with a certain Disney movie, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
And it's
predates it
Nick
by a
Kroll,
few
John
years.
Mulaney, and of
He's
course
right.
those two work together on Kroll Show. And if you can tolerate John Mulaney's style of humor, then
Oh,
maybe.
definitely.
There's worse.
This is definitely something that you need a strong stomach for, and you can really think back upon like, oh yeah, it was actually kind of like that in many ways. You definitely need a strong constitution to watch this show.
My pick this week, we talked about the 12900KS earlier. It's on sale. You can buy it now. It's kind of the spiritual successor to the old Extreme Edition CPUs back in the Pentium D, Pentium 4 era. But forget that. Why would you spend $779 on Newegg right now for a 12900KS when you could buy a Pentium D for just $750? That's right. On eBay now, you can buy a Pentium Extreme Edition. That's the 965 for just $750. And believe it or not, at this price, there are 8 people watching this listing. It's insane. And recent listings for this processor have gone for over $500. So that's why they're bumping this up to $750. They're not, like, hey, I'm going to take advantage of this.
130 watts. How can anyone work on that?
SL9EJ. If you happen to have one of these, by the way,
It's a 17-year-old processor, man.
sell it.
Yeah.
Sell it now and make next month's car payment and go out to dinner and whatever else
Buy some
you can pay.
Yeah.
That's a discount. Think about it. It's $250 less than it was when it launched.
What socket is this again? What socket?
That's $775, right?
Oh, $775.
775.
All right. Well, that is our show this week. Thanks for listening, watching, however you consume the podcast. We will return next week with more. And I have nothing else to say. Good night.
Silence is consent.
Is Josh frozen, or is he just doing the Josh thing?
I'm doing the Josh.
Oh,
thing
so
again.
good at it. He's so good at it.